Hey, everybody. I'm here with Amanda, founder and CEO of Riley. Thanks for joining us, Amanda.
Thank you so much for having me, Amit.
So tell me a little bit about what Riley does.
Gosh, Riley is the user manual you wish you had when you had kids. Because kids do not come with instruction manuals, although it's like the most insane 0 to 1 job anybody I've ever talked to who has kids has ever had. And also the job for which you are the least qualified and for which the stakes are the highest. And so it's, as you know, having kids, like, you know, having a newborn, especially your first newborn, it's just insanity for like 4 straight months. It's insanity, usually longer than that, but just insanity. And like nobody really prepares you. There's no way to genuinely like get yourself ready for what it's going to be like. And Riley's here to help both in that like critical first year where everything is kind of a marathon and it's just an endurance game. And, all the times after that, as you know, again, as being a parent, the volume of questions, the volume of needs that you have don't decrease, they just change. And so Riley, the ultimate vision is that it should be something that's useful to you as long as you have kids in your house.
That's awesome. Yeah, I totally see it. I remember when I had my first kid, it was like we were on Google all the time, and there's so much content. You don't know what to trust. They're all conflicting. So it actually been really cool to have an app like this at that point.
That was exactly my experience where I have a 2-year-old. And when she was a newborn, my husband, who's also a product manager, and I also at that point a product manager, we were like, we've product managed the heck out of pregnancy. We've prepared as well as 2 people possibly could to be parents. And guess what? No, we didn't, because you can't. And we would have these moments, usually many, many during the day, but at least one of what I used to call my 3 a.m. oh shit moments, where you like wake up in a cold sweat and it's either your kid's making a weird noise or you've just had an anxiety dream or you're like, oh my God, is this my life now? Like, what's happening with her? When does it get better? Is she ever going to sleep again? Is this normal? And to your exact point, like Google, Reddit, all of the existing communities and resources for parents are terrible. Because you don't know what good data is. You shouldn't need to have a PhD in economics to understand like what really makes a difference in parenting and early childhood development. And so Riley kind of comes in and is able to tell you, like, because it has access to the best in class data, medical science, everything that's been really thoughtfully prepared with pediatricians, telling you like exactly what does and does not make a difference as a parent. It also has access to your data that you give it, things that you're tracking like sleep and diapers, but also like any of the chats, any of your priorities. And so it can not only say like, here's what we know about children, it's here's what might be happening with your family, with your children. And so it just immediately eases that mental load, especially for new parents where that is just the highest and you have no brain power because you're so sleep deprived.
Yeah. I like it's interesting because we have 2 kids, my wife and I, and after the first one, we're like, oh yeah, we know this now. Second one was completely different. We had a girl and then we had a boy, and he like operates completely differently, has completely different needs. So it's very interesting because like the advice you get a lot of times is like, yeah, it worked for you, but it might not work for me and stuff like that, which is really interesting.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I like wanted to tear out all of my hair reading a Reddit forum where some person on Reddit was like, well, I didn't vaccinate my kids if they went to Harvard. So like you do the math. And it's like, that's not how anything works.
Right.
That's not data. That's barely an anecdote. And like, it's just mostly unhelpful. And that's, I want to say like, this is probably hyperbole, but like 99% of the internet for parents is that way. Just broadly unhelpful.
Yeah. So tell me about the founding story. Did it come after one of these like 3 a.m. wake ups or how did it come about?
Yeah, when my daughter was really little, being a product manager and, working in consumer especially, I remember saying to my husband, like once a day, every day for at least the first 6 months, like, I can't believe that nobody's built a better product around this. All of the products that we're using to track data, to like figure everything out, either they are a really nice looking glorified database where I'm tracking all this data and it's just sitting there, or it's a badly designed, badly built, like selling my data, like really what to me felt really icky product experience, which I also really didn't like. And I was like, I know exactly what I want here. My needs are not like opaque to me. Why isn't anybody thinking about this as a product or like in a product capacity? And that question really stuck with me, even as, my daughter got older and she started sleeping better, which makes, as you know, a huge difference. And, really, we kind of got our feet underneath us as parents. The needs, again, the volume of needs that I had did not decrease. They just changed a little bit. And I kept thinking, like, why is it so hard to get answers here? And also, why is everybody placing so much burden on parents who are already so, again, sleep deprived, so busy, so like out of their depth in terms of like what's going on? And all of the content that you get is so dense. It's like a 400-page book or a 10-hour course. And you're like, I don't have time to watch a 10-hour course about sleep training under the best of circumstances.
Right.
I certainly don't have time to do that right now. And so, the long story short is, kind of kept thinking about this, actually did a little bit of, after I left my previous role at another parent tech company where I was talking to parents all the time and like could tell, oh gosh, parents all over the place really need help here. There's no great solutions. Like decided, hey, it doesn't seem like anybody's going to build this if I don't. Like, I don't know if anybody's thinking about this, and I think it's a huge opportunity. So just decided to build it myself, and here we are, having validated that it's a huge opportunity. There's millions and millions of parents, hundreds of millions of parents in the U.S. And the state of parent mental health is so bad in the U.S. that Surgeon General released a report in August basically saying, like, parent mental health is worse than it's ever been, even though technically we have access to more information. The access is not the problem. It's the what should I be doing and like how does this apply to me that's the problem. And that's exactly where Riley comes in.
That's awesome. So yeah, the access, it's funny because it feels like the access makes it worse. It's like, okay, now which one am I going to choose and everything else? So tell me a little bit about like, what's the vision of the company? Like if everything succeeds, where do you see Riley going in the next few years?
There's a couple of really exciting like expansion packs essentially available to Riley. And that's one of the cool things about this area is that there are a lot of different things that we can do and none of them are necessarily mutually exclusive. So right now we're really like, we're talking to parents, we're working on a product for parents specifically. One of the kind of medium to long-term ideas that we're shopping around is like, hey, what if we could facilitate the conversation between you and your pediatrician? Or what if we could facilitate like you getting information from your pediatrician, like their most recent vital signs, for example, especially really early on when you're going to the pediatrician all the time. What if we could, create these guides where, anytime you as a parent might, have like a question about potty training or like want to like buy a course or a book about some specific parenting milestone like sleep training, potty training, starting solids, tantrums. What if instead we could create something completely bespoke, completely personal for you that you can implement right in the app that like knows you, knows your family, and can help you through kind of these big milestone moments, especially as your child grows. So, in 5 years, as I mentioned at the top of the call, this is really a product that should be useful to you as long as you have kids in your house. Would love to have a product for teenagers or for parents of teenagers who are going through, again, teenagers are having a really hard time, especially in the US right now. Would love to have a product, in the short term around pregnancy and like managing pregnancy and then like the pregnancy to new parent pipeline, all of that. There's just so much.
Yeah. So tell me where you guys are in your journey right now, like pre-product market fit, validating the product, and kind of what are the big successive milestones that you want to hit in the next year or two?
Yeah, the product is right now in public beta. We are pre-PMF, but getting some pretty good early signal that we're on the right track. So we are intentionally keeping our usership pretty contained at the moment, just so that we can learn as much as we possibly can, speak it to as many users as we possibly can, and create the best and stickiest possible version of the product so that in May of next year, we can approach this gigantic, like big, splashy public launch targeting basically Mother's Day seasonality. And then by this time next year, we're hoping to like be really in stride, have the like first super functional version of the product out there, tested, improving, really a very strong initial product. And then a couple of these other products that I mentioned, like potentially pregnancy, potentially these guides, a couple of those either out in the world or very much in process.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about, what's your pitch to candidates? Why should people join Riley?
Thank you for asking. The Riley team and like the product right now is in such an incredible place where it's been really important to me as a leader to be very thoughtful, not only about the culture of the team and like the people that we're hiring, but also about the kind of company that I want to work for, that I would want to join if I were a candidate. And so one of the first and most important things to say about like Riley's team culture is that we're at this point fully distributed, and we really, really value the flexibility, the ability to do your best work when you do your best work. One of the things I always say to the team is, again, because I'm a parent, my life is fluid. Sometimes, like last night, for example, I was up at like 1 a.m. trying to debug something. Every so often, you might get a really late night Slack from me on like a Saturday night. And it's not because my expectation is that you're going to respond to me at that point. That was just a time that worked for me. My expectation is that you'll respond at a time that works for you. So we really value that flexibility, the ability to kind of do your best work when you do your best work. And kind of underpinning all of that is the very, very high level of like implicit trust between the team members and then myself and the team, where none of this would work if I didn't trust that everybody knew what they were doing, had like the ability to operate with complete autonomy, like could really just like take an idea and run with it. That's really how the team works. And it's an incredible team. We have, 5 of us now who are just, we love working together. We meet about every 3 to 6 months for an offsite. Our next one's going to be in Palm Springs. We really, we love the mission. We love each other. And it's really, it's been really exciting. Not to mention that we have, in terms of the brass tacks of average compensation, benefits, all of the stuff that as an employee really matter. It's really important to me as a leader, especially to, spend on talent and to make sure that we are like prioritizing the people that work here, because that's what's going to make the app tick.
That's awesome. Can you tell me a little bit about kind of the traction you have, the investment you have, or kind of the user base, or any early signs from kind of feedback from parents using the product?
Yeah, we have had a lot of incredible early feedback from parents. The idea, and like again, I'm user 0 of Riley, and I'm using it every day, which is really cool.
That's awesome.
But what I find amazing is that the product, even though I've written like 70% of it myself at this point, I've been, I'm an engineer, I've been coding a lot of it on the back end. The product is starting to do things that are kind of magical that I don't necessarily anticipate. For example, we took our daughter to Japan about a month ago, and one of the things that Riley does is it will proactively recommend to you like certain activities or certain things to do that day based on your child's developmental stage, based on your priorities, based on what you're working with Riley on. One of the things I was working with Riley on was like language and vocabulary, and seeing like what new vocab words I could give my daughter in a way that like didn't feel pressureful. So we were in Japan, and I got a recommendation of like, hey, because you're working on vocab and because your daughter is this age and because you're in Japan, and I know that, here are some fun, like easy Japanese words to teach her. I had that moment of like looking at the product and be like, I didn't realize I knew how to do that. And it was like,
that's awesome.
Magical. And so, that anecdote, then seeing that spread across, now many, many users, even though again, we're kind of keeping it fairly contained, people are reporting that like it's surprising them in a very positive and magical way. And that the recommendations are like just baseline extremely useful, especially in those middle of the night moments. And like when we talk about the future product, people are really excited about that. Investors also are excited. We're, about to get some good traction there. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks or so, we'll announce that. And so, we've been really like laser focused on the product vision and on like the product itself. And that's really paid off.
That's awesome. Talk to me a little bit about your team. You mentioned you're 5 people. I know you've been a product manager before. Tell me a little bit about who works at Riley.
Yeah. So we have, there's 5 of us. We have myself, again, I'm a previous like career PM, and the first hire.
Also an engineer, it seems like.
I was never I never did that as a job, but I took some CS in college. I've always loved making things and always loved coding, and just like this was an opportunity, especially when it was just me like in a room by myself, just like hacking away to just like build out my skill set there. And now I'm doing back end, I'm doing TypeScript, like I'm doing all of the different things, which has been really fun. So I
want to double click on that. Like as a PM, just as somebody who's kind of spent a lot of time in the defining what the user wants and needs and prioritizing and stuff. Now that you're in writing code and stuff like that, has it given you a new perspective in like building companies or just building products in general?
No question. I also think that like the ability to build things myself and to like really get my hands into the code and into like the execution of the product has made me a better product manager, if nothing else. It's like how to talk about what needs to be built, how to make technical trade-off decisions, like thinking about like the architecture of the app itself and like the different trade-offs that we might have to make. Like 100% would not be as effective in those areas as I am now if I hadn't spent so much time like really building up those capacities by myself.
That's cool. Yeah.
Which has been really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me more about who else works there.
So the very first hire that I made after we got our initial angel investment was actually a designer, like super great friend of mine who I met working at Etsy. So she and I worked together. We were on the same product team at Etsy. I was her PM. She was my designer. And I just reached out and was like, hey, you're the best UX designer I've ever met. Would you be interested? I know you're cool. Like still at Etsy. And this is a barely formed startup, but like, would you be interested? And one of the things that she said to me that I'll never forget, that like I like carry with me forever, she's like, I'm not really interested in leaving Etsy, and I'm not really like, the startup life is, we'll see, but like I do want to work for you. I believe in you. I believe in this vision that you have. Like I believe in this product, but like I really believe in you. And so like, yes, I would love to do this. And that was such a huge testament to me of like our relationship and also like the power of this idea. And then we have, so that's Mahara, she's the head of design. We also have Shubham, who's our head of growth and marketing. She herself was a former founder in this space. Her company, SoPen, was like on Shark Tank. And she's not a parent, but she knows how to speak to the parenting audience better than anybody I've ever met. Like she's simply phenomenal. And she also, like, very similar thing where, you know, she, again, has never worked for anybody else. She's always been a founder, was thinking about what she wanted to do next. I got connected to her. We were talking and I was like, you know, I think you'd be perfect for this. I would love to have you come and work for us. And she said something very similar. She's like, you know, I wasn't really looking to work for somebody. I was maybe thinking about starting another thing of my own, but I do want to work for you. And I do want to work for this company, which has been, and she's
That's
just
right.
phenomenal. So she's leading all of our like distribution efforts, which in consumer is hugely important. And she has just deep expertise there. Third member on the team is our data scientist, Kaylin. She's actually our newest member. She worked for the same parent tech startup that I worked for before starting Riley. She and I didn't overlap, but we got connected through just LinkedIn. And she was looking for her next role. We got chatting. She's out here in San Francisco. And I was like, you know what? You'd be absolutely perfect for exactly what we need. And she's, you know, one of those people who is so good at pulling just actionable insight out of data, which is, again, so hugely important even at these early stages. And then there are three of us who write code, myself, and then we have Jerson, who is our back-end AI/ML engineer. He's incredible. He has been so like curious and hands-on and like, again, really able to take a lot of like the thought leadership that like we've put together on how we want memory to work, how we want like the different data points and like the different like interactions at scale to work, just run with it, which has been amazing. And then we have an iOS contractor. We're looking for a like full-time iOS leader as well as a full-time AI ML leader. So those are the two that we have hiring in addition to the team right now.
Talk to me a little bit about how you all work. So how does something like an idea go from, you know, an idea to actual shipped code?
Yeah. A very good question. Because we're a startup and because things are just moving quickly all the time, generally what'll happen is, you know, we have weekly and like daily ceremonies, but we're not a very meeting heavy culture. We have 2 weekly team meetings that the full team will attend. The first one is a magic meeting on Monday, which is when we go through all hands, it's announcements, it's like a way to see performance and like go through goals and have like big like team-wide discussions. We also have a sprint planning every week on Thursday. And that's really when we think about like features and prioritization, that's really the opportunity for the full team to get together and talk about like the work that's upcoming, the features that have been requested, like the feedback that we're getting, and like take a look at the roadmap and prioritize and reprioritize if needed. And really the outcome of that meeting is everybody gets a sense of like what is the best and highest use of our time for the next week. Like what do we really need to get out? What do we really need to be working on over the next like 5 days in the next week? We also have a daily stand-up, and that's really the time for like the engineering and product team to like get together and talk about, all right, because we have this main priority or because we've learned this new thing, like what are we doing today to further that? And it turns into an incredible discussion. Usually we pair during that session. It really like allows us to like bring everything that we're doing to the table, talk it through, make decisions, and ultimately like move forward, which is really cool. So the long answer to your short question is, you know, we often will get like a lot of feedback, a lot of feature ideas. We have our roadmap and we meet and discuss that really regularly with a couple of like dedicated times per week when we just all kind of bring it to the table and like have a great discussion.
Awesome. So you talked a little bit about this, but I'd love to like learn a little bit more about your culture, and especially when a team is as small as you all are. It seems like one big part of that is just you and how you work as a founder and what you like doing, what you don't like doing type of stuff. And the other description that I really like is it's the set of behaviors that you reward and the set of behaviors that you punish. So in context of that, tell me, what is the culture like at Riley?
Whew. You know, thinking about kind of the first half of that question, you know, like what is my working style like? You know, what do I like to do? How do I kind of see myself as part of the team? You know, the thing I always like to tell the team is that, you know, my first, biggest, and best priority is really to them, and to make sure that they have what they need to do their best possible work. When we put together the team and when we think about like our hiring needs in the next year, for example, what we're looking for are people who are absolute experts in our field, who have competencies or like abilities that we do not currently have on the team. The reason why we look for that is because we want to make sure that we have all of the possible expertise in the room so that we can make the best decisions. And so for me, you know, I, especially as a PM, especially as a generalist, like I have a lot of different competencies in a lot of different areas. I'm not particularly deep on any one thing usually. And so it's very important to me to like gather a team of people who are experts. Like Shubham, who's an expert in growth and marketing, Meher, who's an expert in UX design in ways that I am not, our Jerson, who's an expert in AI ML, so that we can have really, really thorough and thoughtful discussions and make really good decisions. So yeah, it's really, like first purpose is to serve the team, make sure that they have what they need, make sure that I'm not blocking them, make sure that they have the strategic direction that's needed so that we can all run really quickly in the same direction. As well as, I'm especially like these days as we're like going through our public beta, I'm very much in the code all the time, essentially picking up like the remaining work. So the engineers will have like dedicated work that they'll be doing, and I'll pick up whatever's left so that they can focus on both what's exciting to them and also where their expertise is. In terms of the like second half of your question, which is like, what are the behaviors that are rewarded and like, what are the behaviors that are punished? Thinking about what we really, look for and really like, it's, like first and foremost, a high sense of like autonomy and curiosity. We really, really love working with people who like can take an area and run and not need a lot of like back and forth hand holding, like, all right, what's next? All right, what's next? Like, I really talk about it in terms of both being a problem solver, but also being a problem finder. And being able to surface the problems, take proactive action. Like we're a small company, I'm one person, we're all spread across a lot of different areas. Being able to be that problem finder and then solving the problems that you find is hugely important. Also have a super high bar for like excellence and the quality of what we're doing, starting from the design in through like the way that like our code comes together. And like you can see that on our website too. Like we really, really care, because this is a consumer product, that it's a beautiful product that's easy to use, it's not buggy. We're placing the right emphasis on getting it right as well as getting it done quickly.
I'd love to double click on that because it's very interesting, because it's two things, right? It's not only consumer, but it's also you're dealing with parents and their kids, which are really important to them, I'm sure. I know. So how do you balance being able to go quick versus being able to like get something at a level of polish and bug freeness, I guess? How do you do that? Yeah. What is your strategy?
That's a really good question. And we are definitely still perfecting this, especially as we get more users and we get more feedback and as we go. But it really comes down to only working on a few things at a time, not trying to boil the ocean, certainly, which is it is so easy. And like the tendency really is like, there are so many things to do and I want to do all of them right now. And it's a lot more difficult to take a step back and be like, no, we need better focus. We need to like really figure out like what are the one, maybe two things that like anybody needs to be doing at any given time to make the biggest impact. And a lot of that comes from me, and also being able to talk to our users and understand like what do they want? What do they need? What are their problems? What are the gaps in our product that are not currently serving their needs? And from all of that information, distilling down into like, what are our priorities? What do we need to be doing? What do we need to be focusing on in order to make maximum impact? So it really like it comes down to focus, having a really good sense of like what is the most important, what's needed at any given time, and also being, we're a pretty goals-based culture, right? Like even though it's super early and we're just like at the point where we're starting to collect a lot of data, having goals around like what we want to get done each week, each month, each quarter has been really helpful as a forcing function to like prioritize. So if something comes up and it's not like directly related to this like one important thing that you're doing, people are very empowered to push back and say, hey, I can't do that right now. Hey, not a priority for me right now. Let's put it on this. Like, let's follow up with this next week, to have a follow-up, but like be very protective of your time and what you're working on so that, we're not trying to do 17 million things at once as much as we can. Again, it's a startup. So, with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Quickly, how do you all interview? Like, what does the interview process look like for one of the roles that you have currently running?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. The first call is with me, where we talk about you, your background, what's exciting to you in your next role, what's exciting to you about Riley. And I really try to leave as much of the time as possible open for candidates to ask me questions. And I do this for two reasons. The first one is that I love to know what people want to know about me, about the company, about the team, about the progress. And it's also something that's very instructive. It tells me like, what are you thinking about? What are you prioritizing? What are you trying to double click on as a way to kind of prospect into like, are you like, is this the right stage of company for you? Is this the right culture for you? Like, is this going to be a good fit? And so it's like both in order to provide really good information, like the information that's important to you, but also to learn what's important to you. So that's kind of the first step. The second piece, depending on the role, is usually either a chat with one of our other engineers to talk about, it's not a technical interview really, it's really like working styles and like this is a person you're going to be interfacing with a lot, like is there like a mutual connection there? Then there's usually a pretty short and compensated technical challenge just to like see how you think about code. see how you think about like big problems and decomposing them and like taking action in a short amount of time. And then after that goes well, it's really just like 1 or 2 culture interviews with the 2 non-technical members of our team. So it's like 2 30-minute meetings and then we're done.
That's awesome. I haven't heard many people do take homes in a compensated way. Like, can you talk to me a little bit about that and why you all do that?
Yeah, the take-home exercises are compensated with a $50 Amazon gift card, and we do that because time is valuable, right? Like, I don't want people to be doing work or like taking time out, from their lives to do this, work for a company that they may not even work for. I remember as a candidate, especially as a PM candidate, having to go through the take-home exercises and do all the like product stuff and never compensated. And it would take me hours and hours and hours that I would never get back, and being really frustrated about that and being like, well, I had to go through all this work and I do all this stuff. Like, this was like not a great use of my time if you were just going to like not even really look at it anyway. And so it's important to me that people know that like your time is valuable and you are valuable. And even if it doesn't work out, like, I don't want you to feel like you have wasted that time.
That's awesome. Talk to me a little bit about, so you've had a successful career as a PM, now you're a founder.
Yeah.
What have you learned? What has surprised you? What has been something different than you expected, or any like contrarian takes now that you've done this new role for a little while?
Oh gosh, being a founder and also like being the PM at the company, because that's my background, and having been a PM previously, one of the things that becomes really clear to me is when a company has a good product-led culture and when it doesn't. PMs generally do not have authority. Like, you have influence but not authority, and your ability to execute really depends on like your ability to get people to do what you say. And also a major part of that is whether or not the culture sets PMs up to succeed. And that's shockingly difficult, as it turns out. I have worked at very few companies that have actually like really walked the talk of being a product-led culture, and like a culture where PM's lives are not made arbitrarily more difficult, if that makes sense. And so, when we think about post PMF, post, some critical mass of usership, when like we're in a place where we have a lot of features and like I can't PM them all myself, and we think about like adding PMs to the mix, when that happens, it's going to be really important to me to like make sure that the culture is genuinely product-led. Obviously, product being many different functions and many different like parts of those functions, like design and engineering, but like that product managers, in order to be effective, like really need the support of the company and of the team. And if you don't have that, it's very, very difficult to be effective. And if you're not effective, then what are you doing there? Like, what's the purpose?
Have you found that like, Etsy's obviously post product market fit. This is pre product market fit. Have you found learned anything about being a PM just in general in a purely pre product market fit company?
Oh, absolutely. And when you think about like product market fit, you have general product market fit where like the company is reaching an audience and solving a problem for that audience. There are a lot of times as a PM where you may work on different parts of that company or different features of that company that do not themselves have PMF. And so, it's a really good like thing to think about, especially if you're a PM who's thinking about becoming a founder and being like, oh, well, I don't have any 0 to 1 experience. You actually probably do if you've ever launched a product, or if you've ever taken like a new spin on something or done an A/B test. Even like the steps to PMF really are the same, no matter if it's like you're trying to get your company to PMF or you're trying to get a very specific like small feature to PMF, which is talk to your users as much as possible, figure out what they need, figure out what their like huge problem or like the huge gaps in the market are, figure out how you can fit and like fill that gap and fix those problems or solve those problems as much as you possibly can, and how you're going to know whether or not that's true. And like that process is pretty much the same, even though again, like the stakes do feel certainly higher, given that it's, a company and, versus like, oh, the company, if this product doesn't, or this feature doesn't exist, the company will continue on. Like, we're not there yet. We will be eventually, but we're not there yet.
Well, thank you so much, Amanda. This has been awesome to hear about you, hear about Riley. If people want to learn more about Riley, where should they go?
Go to RileyApp.com. Please feel free to email me at founder@RileyApp.com. Very excited to hear from everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you, Amit.